Ma scusa, voglio prendere la colazione quando io mi alzo, non quando tu vuoi servirmi. What's up, everybody? This is Cullen Gandy, and welcome to my channel where I talk about finance, stories from my misadventures in business and work, and basically anything that's going to help you get to where you want to be down the road in life. Today, I want to talk a little bit about my story of what it was like working and sort of living in Italy. I lived there from 2016 in September all the way to July 2017, and while I was working there was a lot of stuff that I picked up on and a lot of stuff that really opened my eyes as to what was going on in the European Union. Now, first and foremost, I want to preface all of this by saying that I've always really kind of been passionate about Italy and Italian culture and language ever since I was going to, university down in Georgia. Working in Italy is a very, very strange experience because it's like working in an entire different planet. I mean, the cities are set up in a completely different way. You've got so much art and architecture and structural history everywhere that as you're looking around, I think a lot of the Italians that live there really are numb to it. But one of the things that I found that was specific to Italy itself, unlike many of the other major European countries, is that actually unemployment in 2017, and I assume still today, is still a very, very major factor and a daily part of life for many Italians. You see, the Italian banking system, and by extension Italian families, never quite bounced back from the major mortgage meltdown crisis of 2007. So when I was called to work over in Italy, it was because of my singing studies and my ability to sing in operas. I had won a competition in the United States in New York that granted me sort of like this 12-year sort of internship type apprenticeship working for an opera house called Teatro Regio di Torino. So you can imagine, opera singer going to Italy, kind of the dream, right? Well, kind of not, actually. I mean, if you know Italy, you know that the first thing that you're going to encounter when you get into Italian customs and into the Italian way of life is that getting in and working for Italians can be a bureaucracy nightmare. In fact, when I went to the police station in Turin to give them all of my documents for my work visa, that was at the beginning of my process in September 2016. And then I finished out my entire tenure with the opera and with my work with several sales jobs that I helped consult along the way, all the way through to almost August 2017. To this date, I never got any documentation that said that I'm actually legal to work in Italy. Even though I did get the initial work visa, I never actually got the full documentation for what I was looking for. So with this much governmental bureaucracy and hoops to jump through, you can only imagine what Italian business owners have to go through just to sort of squeak out a living in an economy that really hasn't emerged out of this major crisis from a decade or more ago. When I arrived in Italy initially, they had got this apartment lined up for me that was completely covered by mold, but the landlord sort of painted over it with this anti-mold paint. Of course, there was a leak in the apartment from the roof, so the first big rain, it just sort of made all the paint fall down. I was like coughing and sneezing because of the mold. And on top of that, I couldn't find another place to live because I needed to get the funds cleared from the opera to actually find a new place and pay for it. And because when I arrived, the airport had lost my baggage in transit, there was this 6-day period where I was just sleeping in the kitchen living room area couch in the same clothes because I had nothing else to wear and I was covered with mold, spores, and apparently paint and wet garbage. Things didn't start off on a great foot, but bad things can happen, right? I did find a place to stay in the interim while they were looking for a more permanent solution, and then I eventually got this really cool studio that was at the top of a building where I had the whole top of the roof of this building as my terrace. And I'll probably add some pictures to show you what that terrace view was like, because it was like really primo. You could see the Alps in the distance and everything. To understand what it's like to work in Italy, you kind of have to understand Italian culture. And that is to say that they aren't always very precise with their scheduling. Sometimes scheduling can be more of a suggestion than a commandment, right? For me, it was a little bit different because as an opera company, you have to kind of start on time to get the production rolling. There's a lot of money involved in that. The major thing is that the people were brilliant. The people working artistically were brilliant. Everybody knew their stuff. Everybody came prepared and had immensely good craftsmanship associated with their singing and their artistry, right? That was fantastic. All of the salespeople at an institution that I'm not going to name, but a major Italian bank, I did some sales consulting work. All of those people seemed fairly competent, but did end up being a little bit scattered and misguided at times. So scheduling in the business sector seemed more like a suggestion. Scheduling in the artistic end of things was really a little bit more precise. The main thing though was the money. People getting paid. While I was being paid on time, I was actually being compensated from an American private equity company that was the sponsor of my tenure there. So while I was working there, I was actually being employed by an American company. While I was working as sort of a consultant, mind you, this was not an officially compensated kind of situation. So I didn't expect any pay stubs or anything. They just usually gave me whatever they could give me for the advice that I could give them at the time. And what I gathered from the many, many brilliant people that I met there is that it wasn't uncommon to not be compensated for your work months or even years down the road. I had a super brilliant friend named Daniela who I met there, who worked as a professor of English at the University of Turin as an associate professor. Now she was telling me, as we had met, I think it was must have been October 2016, that she was just now being paid 10,000 euro from the entire year and a half before. Can you imagine doing a year and a half worth of work, one, as a professor of English at a university, and two, for that amount of money, which is basically, I think, roughly $15,000, and three, a year and a half after you did all the work. To be honest, I didn't really see how a lot of these people made ends meet or made a living at all, because you have to pay rent, I assume, so like, where did this money come from? And this is a question that I kind of actually asked myself several times as I was seeing how people lived in Italy, because in the north, where I lived, was supposed to be the business sector of Italy. Now, while the business folks did seem rather savvy, and there was a lot of great managerial training at the University of Bocconi, where a lot of these people at this unnamed bank that I was doing consulting for, where a lot of those folks came from, a lot of the application of the management really did not manifest itself. Italy is a country that is notoriously bad at execution of things, right? It's not the same kind of engineering as you're going to see in England or Germany, right? But there is a little bit more flair for style. My job basically was to consult the tellers of this area on how to engage the English-speaking population in order to increase the turnover of consumer credit or credit card sales, or instant lines of credits as well. So, you know, consumer loans on products and or services. Now on this side of the tracks, the business and finance side, is where I saw a lot of the manifestation of how the unemployment has really hit Italy. If you look at the bank tellers, I mean the very lowest level bank managerial staff, and even just the underlings, you know, the tellers, the people who greet you, they're all in their late 40s or 50s or even 60s sometimes, because you have to be that old to be even considered for the position, because there's not enough positions to go around. Now I know what you're saying, like, well, if that's the case, what are all the young people doing? Good question. A lot of times they're just out drinking and doing things, and they're studying, and they have hopes, and they have aspirations. But a lot of the most brilliant Italian youth, when they're done with their studies, they try to get out of Italy. There's a big brain drain that's going out of Italy, and so we have the best and the brightest of Italy going principally to France or England or even the United States to achieve their dreams so that they can eventually make a life for themselves. house because it's just not an option where they live. Home ownership as a concept for young Italians, going in, buying things with mortgages, qualifying on their income, is just something that isn't occurring right now. And so they're either still living with their parents or they're finding some way to rent an apartment or cohabitate with one another to make ends meet. What you will find in Italy on almost every corner are these things called bars. And when you think of bars, you're going to think, get drunk and, eat bar peanuts or whatever. But it actually is where they go to get coffee. Now, the coffee scene in Italy is you go in the morning, you get your cappuccino or your espresso, you stand at the bar there and just chug it down and then leave, right? How they knew that I was actually American is because they have customs around how you have your coffee. So, for example, I would wake up sometimes at 11 a.m., go to the coffee bar and order a cappuccino, and they're like, oh, you must be American because you had milk after 12, and nobody does that, right? But that's pretty interesting too, because the people getting the jobs even at the coffee bars and the grocery stores are going to be people that are at least in their late 20s and 30s too. So you're not going to see teenagers working the bagging jobs. You're going to see people out in the streets, because when I was working in Italy, it was legal to go around and drink beer outside in public and party, and that is something that Italians really, really love to do. Italians are a people that love to come together with large groups of friends and have really, really memorable experiences with one another. A lot of the youth who are mostly disaffected at this point, really just disillusioned with life, and many of whom I talked to have explained why this was, sort of just trash the place. And as a result, you'll see a lot of graffiti, you'll see a lot of people just leaving their dog waste on the ground and not really treating their public areas the way that they ought to be respected, because we have hundreds and sometimes thousands of years of history on these streets. So working in Italy, yeah, can be kind of tenuous when you take into account the fact that I was somebody who was employed there who was a foreigner, probably taking a job from somebody who was Italian who could probably do the job as well, right? So we know that people don't always get paid on time or even in the same year. We know that people don't always execute on their business strategies and goals. So even though I did prove that a lot of these strategies that I incorporated with the tellers in real time worked, and that it did convert people into clients and people who engaged with the consumer credit, after I left, I'm not actually certain that they incorporated those things on a corporate or even regional level for the bank. One thing that I really did enjoy about my time in Italy, though, is all of the really super brilliant people that I met along the way, such as my friends Daniela and Nina Duca and Paolo Ingorasciota, and a bunch of these folks that you probably wouldn't have met otherwise because they're such a diverse crowd. But despite there being so much great talent and so many brilliant minds available to the Italian government right now, they just can't get past, this bureaucracy. It has its roots in organizations that go back, hundreds of years. In fact, the Italian youth are some of the least patriotic people I've ever met because they're not getting any benefit no matter what changes happen in the government. Most of all because they don't have a direct vote a lot of times for those people in the different bodies of government. They can only vote for a small minority of those people before their representatives have more say. Now, prior to this, I'd probably spent at least 2 or 3 years combined of my life in Italy, experiencing the different regions and the flavors and everything having to do with different cultures that mesh together in Italy. This is super apparent whenever you go to a different city and you'll see that there's a completely different palette of cuisines. They have what they call slow food, which is to say that they only draw their food sourced it locally, which is really cool. And living and working in Italy is something that made me really aware of the fact that American food is uniquely trying to kill all of us. So when you eat Italian food, it's apparent that, hey, I don't feel quite as lethargic as I did when I was living in the United States. Now, I'm back in the United States, but I try to be a little bit more conscious about what I'm eating. The main thing is wherever I went, the further south I would go in the country, the more problems that I saw that stemmed from bad governmental choices and bad, situations in general, having to do with access to funds, access to jobs, and how infrastructure was set up. In fact, there was a certain region in Italy where they had outsourced their water to a French company that just was not taking any responsibility for the actual purification of the water. And so there was a water crisis in this one region. Elsewhere, when I went to Naples, there was a trash situation there where not a lot of trash was being collected for whatever reason. And wherever I would go, I would talk to the people in the region. And the one thing that came up again and again and again is if they didn't already own a home, they couldn't afford to buy a new home, and a lot of the people, since they didn't have jobs, just took out straight installment loans to cover the costs of their living, knowing that they're probably never going to pay those loans back. And let's be honest, the banks probably know it too, because they're not underwriting with any sort of urgency or specificity. Bottom line, if you want to go somewhere to visit, to be immersed in culture and expand your horizons and think and talk about new ideas, definitely Italy is a great place to go because they have a great heritage, a great tradition of cuisine, they have a great tradition of scholarship and literature and art and just so many wonderful things there. Would I recommend working and living in Italy as a foreigner? Well, it wasn't for me. Utilities like electricity are super, super high. There isn't a lot of job security, even if you do have a job. And if you don't have a job, I really don't even understand how a lot of those people are making ends meet in the first place. But if you want to be somewhere where you can work wherever you want, if you can work remotely and you don't really need to be stuck in one place, and you want to be immersed in a vibe, you want to feel really good about your surroundings, you want to take in the culture and the art, Italy might be the place for you. So that was my insight into my time when I was working in Italy. Let me know if you've had a similar experience in the comments below. We can sort of commiserate about it. Or if you've had a really great experience and you want to talk about how your job in Italy worked, leave that in the comments below too, and we can sort of chat about it as well. I hope you liked this video. If you did, go ahead and leave that like button smashed, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so I can keep bringing more content like this to you. Also, if you like videos about personal finance, mortgage finance, and advice about how to get your life going in the right financial direction, stick around because I shoot a lot of those videos out in this channel as well. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you when I see you.